Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name's John Young, and I'm a California fraud fighter. I'm a member also of the uh, California Watch Network for AARP. And I'm really excited because this is getting to be an annual occurrence now during Cybersecurity Awareness Month in October. We're having our cyber chats. And um, I know this is going to be great information for you. It's going to be interactive. We have some special guests here, and I'll be introducing them, but we'll also take your questions too. So please, I'd like to ask you to put yourself on mute so that we can hear the guests and you don't talk over what they're saying or what I'm saying. So we're going to start the conversation in a moment, but I want to give you some facts first to show how important this is. There are almost $1 billion of reported losses to the Federal Trade Commission where social media scams have occurred for people that are older adults. Now, how many complaints is that? Almost 100,000 complaints have come in regarding social media scams. That sounds like a lot, but from my own personal experience, I've met a lot of people. Just the other day, I met two women who had been scammed for over $10,000, and yet they hadn't reported it yet. So I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. So today, I'm joined by a great panel of guests. And the first guest is actually a recurring guest. He was actually co-host last year, Dave Morrow. And Dave has a real long history in cybersecurity and in the military. He served for 12 years as a special agent for the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. And he's also headed a cyber incident response and threat intelligence for major banks. And on top of that, Dave's testified to Congress. So Dave's a real expert. Dave, thanks for coming today. Once again,
Thanks,
good to
John.
see you. I'm excited you're here again this year. My second guest is Carlos Naranjo, and this is real interesting because Carlos is with the FBI as an intelligence agent, so he gets all of this information coming in, and we're going to talk about what he does with that information when we get to Carlos. And he covers financial crimes and the healthcare fraud for the entire Eastern District of California. So thank you, Carlos, for joining us today.
Thank you for the introduction, John.
You're very welcome. And our third special guest is Darren Mott. And Darren was actually an FBI special agent, a supervisory special agent for over 20 years, who spent his time investigating and managing cyber crime. So you can see Darren is a super expert when it comes to cybersecurity, investigating these crimes. He's founded his own cyber shield, Gold Shield Cyber Investigations and Consulting, and he does a variety of consulting services for small and medium businesses, law firms, and families. He's a host of podcasts. He's written a book, and we're going to talk about that further. So, Darren, just want to say welcome to you also.
Thank you, John. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, Dave, I'm going to talk to you, kicking off our conversation. So to give everyone a little idea of where we're going with this on our first cyber chat, which is focusing on social media, please just give us a little background on what is social media.
Well, John, social media is an application that people usually use on the internet, where it allows them to correspond with their friends. They build profiles, and folks follow them, and they post pictures and messages and videos that they want people on the internet, their friends, to see. Most people are familiar with Facebook, which was pretty much one of the first real big social media sensations. And already it's the biggest one still in the world. But there are a lot of others: Instagram, YouTube, others like that do various things. But it's all you can post information on yourself, post what you're doing. Older folks use it for the grandkids. Keep up. I mean, I use it to keep up with my grandkids because I can't keep up with all of them otherwise.
Now, Dave, we're talking about using Facebook to communicate with family. You're doing with your grandkids. How do these people use social media to scam others, especially older adults?
Well, scammers are endlessly inventive, and many of them, this is their business. And so, just like any other business, they're going to use whatever tool they have to make it more efficient. So, social media now allows them to reach hundreds, if not thousands, of people at one time over the internet with very little chance of getting caught relative to other ways. And it also gets them to do a capability of the scammer can impersonate other people and use those tools, especially with what we have with AI and things coming down the pike now, that can be used to impersonate politicians, do misinformation, do all kinds of things they shouldn't do. But the big thing is anything a scammer can do offline, he can also do on social media, as well as it's a good intelligence source for them. It's a bonanza for people because people tend to overshare on social media. They tend to put too much personal information in their own profiles. They tend to reference perhaps things they wouldn't reference face to face. And so if I'm a scammer and I want to gather information on a potential target, I can go to social media and find a lot of stuff that I normally would not be able to find.
Now, I can go and talk about something personally myself, Dave. A few years ago and I'm not going to pick on Facebook, but Facebook Marketplace, I used to sell a lot of things on there. But I've noticed now when I put things up for sale, like guitars, it seems like I'm flooded with scammers that are just infiltrating Facebook Marketplace. So I just want to throw that out there for people. Facebook Marketplace and some of these marketplaces on the different social media sites, or maybe an ad will come up giving a great deal. It's not really a great deal. It's just a full-on scam. Now, can you share some examples of social media scams that you've seen, Dave?
Sure. Well, I mean, everybody's familiar with phishing scams with email or text messages where you get something came out from, if you're old enough to remember the old Nigerian prince things we used to get in the mail and on fax machines when we had those. This is just the updated version of that times 10,000. And basically the phishing can be done very easily, very cheaply, and using social media. Most social media programs allow you to kind of flock together with your friends of similar interests. So if a scammer is wanting to send a targeted phishing message to a particular group, all he or she has to do is join a group, find a group, and join it as a participant, and then he has a ready-made group. So phishing in general is, all the kinds of different phishing messages we see, you'll find on Facebook also. The big thing we see with social media in general is impersonations, and particularly romance scams, things that are investment scams, things that allow people to pretend to be somebody that they're not. And because we overshare, like I said earlier, as a population, they're able to gather a whole lot of detailed information on whoever they're impersonating to make it really, really believable. So a romance scam will be somebody who contacts, these guys will hang out on dating sites, for example, and so they'll contact somebody and be a very friendly and approachable and complimentary and do what we call grooming in the romance scam world, which is basically building up their confidence and pretending to be someone they're not, and pretending to have an interest or a love interest in the potential victim. And over time, then they'll start asking for money or whatever they're going to do. Usually it starts off asking for money, and they'll just keep going and going and going.
Yeah,
So
I've
those are
seen
the
a combo scam like that, Dave. It's funny you mentioned that. Just recently, a man was scammed for over $30,000. Huge amount of money, right? And it started out as a romance scam that developed into a crypto scam, and we'll talk about that a little. But he wound up just going and giving up over $30,000 to someone he thought he was emotionally involved with on the internet.
Yeah, I do counseling on our ARP call center for fraud victims, and I've talked to many romance scam victims. Several of them have lost north of $1 million, and in scams that go on for years. And the thing about especially romance scammers as well as crypto scammers is they'll keep taking the money as long as you give it, and until you let them know they've been found out and make them go away and stop communicating with them. They're going to keep coming back because maybe they'll get more money out of you.
Right. And one of the things that they do is that they say when people want to cash out that they need to pay more money as fees before they can pull their money out. So people have lost money on the scam, and then when they try to cash it out, they actually lose more money. Another interesting thing that I've seen is that the supermarkets and places where um, the crypto ATMs are alert to the fact that when they see an older adult there putting in thousands of dollars, that it might be part of a scam. So what these scammers are doing now is they're having people go to different places. They'll have 20 places maybe that they'll have them go to all over town. So that they'll deposit these crypto amounts to the tune of many thousands of dollars, but it won't set off a red flag because they're not going to go to the same place twice. So Dave, what tips can you give us about social media scams and how to avoid them?
Well, just remember when you're on any kind of social media that there have been statistics out there several years ago that up to 60-65% of the profiles on social media pick your application, but a large percentage of them are going to be fake. And just be wary of anybody that contacts you, especially out of the blue. Be very cautious about what information you post on yourself in your profile on social media. And if you are in a group that somebody just comes on and pushes the relationship, and I know my FBI colleagues are going to have some really good red flags on that type of behavior here in a minute. But if anybody really pushes themselves and things just seem like they're going too fast, then that's a red flag in and of itself. And if they declare their love after the first 10 minutes meeting or first day or two of talking about online, then that's another red flag. So those kinds of things, or at least, but being wary is the biggest thing we have to have doing anything online anymore, whether it's social media or anything else.
All right, Dave, that's great information. And I also want to let our audience know that the chat is open. So if you want to put your questions into the chat, please do so. You can start doing that now. And now I'm going to move on to FBI intelligence analyst Carlos Naranjo. And Carlos Naranjo is, as I described, based in California. And Carlos, can you give us a little background on what your job actually is? Because we're well aware of what these special agents do, but I'd like to know a little more about what you do as far as gathering intelligence and then analyzing it.
Okay. So we're kind of the intel counterpart to what the special agent role is. So on my day-to-day basis, I get all the intel that comes in from all our cases. In my case, it's financial crimes and healthcare fraud. And I kind of sift through it on a day-to-day basis and see what sticks out to me, what could be considered a trend, what could be considered a pattern, and then from there, kind of analyzing to see if it's, hey, maybe it's just happening here. Is it happening in the whole state of California? Is it happening nationwide? From there, we continue our analysis, maybe connect with people whose specialty is this, communicate with our agents, and kind of get a better understanding to which we create a product out of. Product is just a written report of different varieties, and we disseminate these either internally or externally to our partners, so other law enforcement, other DOJ, and stuff like that. But yeah, that's basically what an intel analyst does on a day-to-day basis.
Now, Carlos, how do you prioritize these to give to the agents? Do you have some that you say instantly, that's critical, and others are maybe a lower priority? How does that work?
I mean, there's obviously stuff that kind of calls out to you that's, for example, I'm going to talk about this later, AI. AI is being used to replicate voices, it's being used to replicate faces. It's being used in now text communication to kind of follow a script and scam, basically perform a scam without involving a human on the other end. So stuff like that I feel is very important. That stuff calls out to you. So that is stuff that I immediately inform other people, other intel analysts, other agents that, hey, this is happening not just in our Eastern District of California, but all of California nationwide.
Now, Carlos, who's doing these social media scams? Are they organized crime rings? Are they lone criminals? Can you give me a little background on that, please?
Yeah, so most of this is organized crime. For example, I was going to talk about pig butchering later on. Pig butchering initially started in China in around 2016, I believe, and its, let's say, business model was kind of adapted and improved by Southeast Asia, especially during COVID, when everyone was basically attached to the internet since there was nothing better to do. These now fraudsters, and the sad truth is that most of these fraudsters are victims themselves. They also did fall for a scam. Most likely they were, promised a very lucrative job opportunity. And once they showed up to their interview, they got kidnapped, and now they're forced to scam other people for a living. But yes, most of this is funding for organized crime, mainly in Southeast Asia.
Well, kidnapping is very extreme, obviously. Now, that's a real interest to older adults because a lot of us that are on Social Security, we do part-time jobs, they call them gig work and stuff like that. So there's a lot of scams going out where they're trying to get people's Social Security numbers by dangling a good job, but they want people to fill out an application and they want the Social Security number, and getting a Social Security number with someone's name, address, and birthday, that helps build a fake identity profile for these criminals. So that's really one thing that we need to look out for as older adults, is that if there's a job opportunity on the internet, it seems too good to be true. It probably is too good to be true. If someone contacts you by text for a job, then that is almost guaranteed to be a scam. And if they ask for your Social Security number, that's not required by law. So never, ever give it out. So Carlos, when you get these reports, what are the red flags that you look for?
Red flags concerning that there's possible fraud, or red flags?
Yes.
Okay.
How do you disseminate between what might be a report that someone thinks they've been scammed, or where you know right away that they definitely have been scammed?
So for personal awareness, it's if the fraudster themselves is initially immediately pushing for the conversation to be switched to a different platform, such as WhatsApp. The thing with WhatsApp is that it encrypts its messages within their app. So that means they kind of take your message, scramble it up, and unless you have the key to decode it, it doesn't make any sense. And for us at the FBI, it is a problem because even if we subpoena the WhatsApp messages, we will only get the user's contact information. So that's a big red flag. Second one is if the investment opportunity that they mentioned is related to cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is a fastest and easy way to launder money and get it overseas immediately and spend it. So yes, anything to do with cryptocurrency, you should know something is up. The third one is if there's symptoms of emotional manipulation. If I'm being told that this individual is bringing up all these vacations they take, all the cars they own, all the large purchases, and they kind of downplay what you do, kind of enticing you to buy into their lifestyle and to what brought about their lifestyle, which would be that investment opportunity. So stuff like that. So I guess to summarize, emotional manipulation, investment in cryptocurrency, and then all using apps that have encrypted messaging.
So basically, they get someone emotionally hooked.
Hmm.
They will tell people a really sad story, maybe the saddest stories that they've ever heard, and develop it over a period of time. Then they create this sense of urgency that there's a real problem, or that they switch it to some kind of investment where they can make a lot of money. Is that how it works?
Exactly. And I mean, the classic example, it's let's say there's a widow who just lost her husband. Um, People are definitely vulnerable during those times. So a scammer might reach out saying, "Hey, I saw your post, and like you, I lost my wife to cancer a couple years ago. I can relate. It gets better." Stuff like that. This feeling of having someone relate to you can be quite needed, especially when you're in such a vulnerable state. And I just want to reiterate, this scammer's persona is completely based on your likes and dislikes, on your current situation, on just about everything. And like David mentioned, everything's on social media. Um, but yes, scammers tend to prey on those vulnerabilities. They and once you're in it, they prey on the shame that comes from the fact that they just stole over 1 million from you and stuff like that. So they are pretty masterful at using psychological tactics.
So one of the problems, Carlos, is that people on Facebook leave their profile in an open state
Mhm.
so that anybody could see it. So I guess the first thing to do is set it to private so that only friends can see it. And you mentioned that they're basically feeding off the likes that they see and try to tailor the conversations and how the scam works through that.
Exactly. So again, setting your profile to private, and then whenever you do get a friend request, if you don't know them, it's okay not to accept it. You're not going to hurt anyone's feelings. If they send you a direct message and your gut feeling tells you, hey, something's off, and like you mentioned earlier, if it's too good to be true, if that beautiful young boy or girl is messaging you, if it's too good to be true, trust your gut instinct, and don't risk it.
Now, do you have any other tips, Carlos, for people on how to avoid being scammed on social media?
Other than keeping your Facebook private, just limit the amount you put on there. Um, Especially, for example, the grandparent scam. They didn't know you were a grandparent until they looked on your social media. They didn't get your grandson's voice to replicate until they saw that video with your grandson talking on your social media. So before you post anything, just I know it's easier said than done, especially since social media has become so intertwined with our culture. But really think of what you're about to post and who can possibly see it, not just your family and friends, but the bad guys as well.
Now, when you talk about AI, some of our audience may not be so familiar with it. AI stands for artificial intelligence, which is improved tremendously over the years. So can you give some idea of the improvements that you've seen in artificial intelligence and how it would affect our audience?
So yeah, so going back to that grandparent scam, so really recently it's evolved to the point where these bad actors can take any voice clip, even the smallest, and kind of replicate it. They start off with just initial messages, short little messages, but now it's to the point where it can maintain a conversation with you. So it gets really, really hard at this point to kind of determine if the other person on the side of the phone isn't your loved one. When it comes to like romance scams and pig butchering, AI gets involved in the point where, like I said, you can give the AI a script to follow, and it can perform the scam independently from any human. So this limits the room for human error. And one of the red flags that I haven't mentioned is that usually these threat actors, their English is their second language. This is a big tell. Well, with AI, there are no language barriers. It extends their reach globally, which is very scary to think of. So here at the FBI, we're trying to be proactive and getting ahead of the capabilities of what AI could bring not only to financial scams, but to just about anything, any part of our lives.
You touched on the grandparent scams. Can you just maybe give a couple of examples so that our audience will be aware if they get one of these calls, what to expect?
Yeah, so usually the call is going to be a loved one, typically a grandchild, in a state of panic, in a crisis situation where they're requesting immediate financial assistance. Um, Please, I understand it's at this point going to sound really realistic, especially with the involvement of AI. And I know it can seem like those seconds on that call can seem for hours, especially if all the adrenaline is going. But please try to calm down and kind of analyze, call the police, make sure that this incident or whatever happened is actually happening and not just being fabricated. But yeah, other than that, other than a kidnapping, maybe a car accident in which like your grandchild's the only one that survived, asking money, all these kinds of stuff. So they really do prey on vulnerabilities, especially catching people in a situation where they might react more erratically, such as your grandchild being kidnapped.
Yeah, and they always say, don't contact law enforcement, right?
Yes.
That's a real red flag right there. And
Mm,
people shouldn't just, run to the bank right away. Should check and see. I had the experience of one of my folks that I was interacting with who told me that their son supposedly was kidnapped from school, but the school wouldn't give them the information that whether the child was in school or not. So they drove over there and the child was in school. So it was actually false, but the school can't give out any information because that would be breaching confidentiality. So people need to contact their family basically, or loved ones, or who would you suggest they contact, Carlos, as soon as they get one of these calls?
from school specifically or in general?
In general.
Um, I would say contact law enforcement. If there's an accident, hopefully law enforcement is very quick to respond, um, and stuff like that. I mean, if there's a kidnapping, I'm sure the parents have already reported it to the police. So law enforcement should be the first to contact to confirm that there isn't anything going on.
Great. So thank you so much. That was FBI intelligence analyst Carlos Naranjo. Thank you so much, Carlos. We've really learned a lot with you. And I'm going to switch from active FBI to Darren Mott, retired FBI, supervisory special agent, 20 plus years. And I know our audience really is anticipating hearing some good stories from you about your transition and what you've experienced coming from the FBI. Can you give us a little background, like what you were investigating when you were with the FBI?
Sure. So I was a high school teacher before I became an FBI agent. And so when I became an FBI agent, and how I got from one to the other is a story for another podcast, obviously. But so I became an FBI agent. I was on one of the first cyber squads in Charlotte, North Carolina. So at the time, there were only 16 cyber squads. And the beauty of it was because dealing with cybercrime and those matters were so new to the Bureau, they really didn't know how to kind of work them. So we were able to do a lot of stuff 25 years ago you really can't do today in the investigative world. So I had a 5-year undercover that I basically infiltrated some criminal groups for the over the course of 4 years and arrested people in 20 different US cities, 7 different countries, got tons of stuff. And then I went into management and didn't really work cases anymore, but managed cases that other guys were working. So helped to enable them to do what they were supposed to do. And so retired out of the Huntsville resident agency out of Birmingham in 2019 and continued to take my passion for education, my passion for cybersecurity, and help people understand what's going on in the cyber world, because it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing, it's different for different groups. You know, for teenagers, it's one thing, for businesses, it's another, for seniors, it's another thing, right? The bad actors are also trying to do the same thing, get money, but the methodologies they use to target these groups are always going to be different. And so I'm just here to help raise awareness.
Yeah, you touched on something really interesting. There's one focus for businesses on how they'll attack them, and there's another on how they'll approach older adults. Can you talk a little about the social media scams that you've seen?
Sure. So, I mean, we talked a lot about them, right? And you got to remember that there's just so many social media sites, right? We talked a lot about Facebook, but you have Instagram. Now, Facebook, Instagram are kind of intertwined. They're kind of the same thing, although they do things differently. Then you have LinkedIn, because I mean, you may still be retired, but you still may be involved in LinkedIn and looking at, you know, friends and family and helping to get people jobs that you know in the past, or helping to confirm that, yeah, I know this guy, he does whatever. There's all these relationships that are built on these social media sites. And obviously the big one now is the pig butchering, right? It's when you get the unsolicited email say, hey, and here's how it works on LinkedIn. And it's a little different on Facebook, but on LinkedIn, they'll say, hey, I liked your profile. I'd like to ask you a few questions because I think you're a very smart person. And then, like Carlos said, then they'll say, hey, now I want to talk on WhatsApp. So it kind of starts that way. Facebook, same thing. Maybe they saw your profile and said, hey, you know, I really like that you grow tomatoes. You're really doing that really great. I would love to know how you did that. And then it evolves into that situation. I had a friend of my wife. Her mother was a widow, and she fell in love on Facebook. I met this guy on Facebook, and within 3 days, he was telling her he loved her. Right? Never met her. She was in Alabama. He was in California. And the daughter couldn't convince the mother that this is not a real guy. He is fake. So they asked, hey, can Darren talk to my mother and just kind of explain the rules here? And so the mother came over to my house and she brought up the guy's Facebook profile. So I looked at it. He had no friends. He followed 190 people, which looked like friends, but were not friends. They were people he followed. And they were all women, ironically. And he'd only had the profile for about 3 months or 4 months. And he had very few pictures. But she said, I believe him. He has no reason to lie to me. He never asked me for any money. So my wife actually took one of the names of the followers and messaged her and said, hey, this guy follows you on Facebook. What do you know about him? And this woman ended up responding back to my wife saying, none of your business. And that was the end of it. So I don't know what the deal is with that. But anyway, so that was kind of humorous.
We can guess.
But yeah, exactly. But I told this lady, I said, look, he's going to ask you for money. Hasn't yet, but he's gonna. And she said, well, even if he does, I don't have any to give him. I go, well, that's great. But when he asks, don't give it to him. 3 days later, he asked for money. He said, I'd love to come see you, but I'm finishing this big project I'm working on. I need $25,000 to finish it so that I can then come and see you. Right. And so fortunately, she didn't get scammed, although the scam was starting down that road. Right. And so, I've had, and some of the older scams you don't see as much anymore that aren't going to go on social media. The thing that really started me wanting to educate people about all these threats, especially seniors, was a lady walked into the office when I was a supervisor in Cleveland, and she had gotten an email. I know this is social media, but I mean, it's a scam, right? They're still scamming seniors. She got an email. She won a lottery online. And so, but they needed a couple $1,000s to pay the taxes. So a neighbor finally brought her into the FBI office and said, hey, here's the situation. She thought she won the lottery online and she's sent $200,000. And so what do we do? And the sad thing I had to say was, there's really nothing I can do. They're all overseas. You've wired the money over. And I use this example simply because this is still how all of this works. This is the ultimate goal. They still want your money, whether it's, you know, grandparent scam or the pig butchering or the tech support, right? You go to Facebook on your browser instead of the Facebook app because you're on your computer, and you type in Facebook incorrectly, and a thing pops up that said your computer is now infected with malware. It's encrypted. Call this phone number to fix it. So it's not a social media scam, but it uses social media to entice the scam, right? And so you call that number and they say, well, yeah, I can help you fix that. So I just need you to download this program onto your computer, and you download that program, and it's what's called a remote access tool. And so or remote desktop protocol, whatever, however you're gonna call it, remote access for them. And you give them basically access to your computer. They go in and pull all your personal information off. They may add malware to your system. They may do a host of things, and ultimately they'll ask you for money to fix the problem. So it's and part of it for me is people having to understand. Oh, I didn't mean to have my hand up there. Sorry, I don't know why my hand is up, but whatever. But so I'm not really raising my hand,
Don't
but
worry about it.
but the issue is understand the threats are changing. But if you can understand the threats targeting you, then you can kind of assess your risk and you can kind of proceed wisely. I say this on my podcast all the time because it's understanding that the people who are here in this room are going to be better educated to that there's threats out there targeting them, because they're coming at you, senior friends of mine, because you have the money. That's why they're coming, because it's where the money is. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, we can see your book, Get Cyber Smart, behind you on the
Right there.
bookshelf. Yeah, so you focus on security awareness, cybersecurity awareness for seniors. Can you give us a few practical strategies on that?
Well, so let's say that probably the biggest thing, probably the most important thing you can do if you do, I'll give you three things, right? One is have a different password for everything. I know that sucks, right? I don't want to have to memorize all of these passwords, but there's password managers that can help you do that, and make sure the passwords are long. But for your bank accounts, for your social media accounts, especially your social media accounts, your email account, different passwords. I know you want to use the same one because it's just easier. But that's no good, because there's so many data breaches going on that the bad guys have dossiers on pretty much everybody on this call, because third-party sites and companies have lost our data, our personal identifiable information. They know where we live. They know, all sorts of information about us. So you have to put these protections in place. So long passwords, different passwords, multi-factor authentication. Again, I know it's no fun to do that. You have to get an extra text message. You have to use an app, whatever. But the bad guy can't get into your accounts if he has your password, but you have multi-factor authentication turned on. Now, if you don't know how to do that, you can just Google multi-factor authentication. It'll walk you through it. Or you can buy my book, because I talk about it on there. But again, I'm not here to promote my book. But anyway, so you can do those things. And the last thing is, if you don't need credit, like if you're not buying a house, you're not buying a car, you're not getting a credit card, freeze your credit. Freeze your credit, all three credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, and whoever the third one is. I can't remember off the top of my head, but freeze them. You don't need it. So that way the bad guy, if he gets your information, he can't then open lines of credit. It makes it harder for them to do identity theft. So, and it costs you nothing to freeze your credit. And then if you need to buy a house, you need to buy a car, unfreeze it, do what you got to do, and then freeze it up again.
So you also have a podcast, and
Yes.
you've talked about some strategies there. Could you please just sort of elaborate on how people could find you on the podcast and then some of the strategies?
Sure. So actually I have three podcasts that I do. They're going to send you a link to all of them on my website too. goldshieldcyber.com has all the podcasts. One I don't do very often anymore. It's my original Cyber Guy podcast. And I used to interview fellow FBI agents and other people about cyber stuff. The one I do 3 times a week is called the Cyber Smart Morning News Update. And it kind of just talks about, here's what's going on in cyber world, but it's not technically based. I'm not talking ones and zeros. I'm not programming cyber stuff. I'm just saying, this bad thing happened. This is why it's important to you. In other words, like if you had a Mr. Cooper mortgage, Mr. Cooper had a data breach, And I mentioned that now your information, and this is the information that was lost, is now susceptible and you may be a victim. So, the key for me really is understanding and being on top of the intelligence threats. I mean, it's even as simple as going to google.com, typing in cybersecurity or cyber data breach, and just get news every day. So you can kind of look and say, well, there's one that happened, but I don't have an account there, so I'm good to go. I mean, you can go, there's a website, and I'll type it in the chat if you want, anybody wants to see it, but it's called haveibeenpwned.com. Type in your email address and it'll show you all the data breaches where your data has been compromised. And you can see that they have, from this one, they have my email address. This one, they have my home address. This one, they have my social security number, all that kind of stuff. So I mean, you just have to be aware that all that stuff is out there. Like I said, I'll type it in the chat here, but yeah.
Okay, well, Marissa's added your website, so people can look for the Strat's just throwing it up there. Thank you, Marissa and Strat. We've got folks working in the background at ARP, Strat Maloma, and Marissa also has been constantly putting stuff up there too, Marissa Gazzardo. So thank you so much, Darren. We've really learned a lot. And I'd like to ask you one final thing that interests me, just a couple of real life cases that you can give that sort of tell the story on situations you've seen of people getting scammed through social media.
Sure. So I mean, I mentioned the lady that came in, right? And then the big one on social media, in addition to pig butchering, because there's tons of those stories. And the problem is you have to understand that there's several truths when it comes to cyber crime problems, is that no one's probably going to jail because they're all overseas. You're probably not getting your money back. And those are probably the two bad things, right? But I mean, another big thing to deal with, and it's important for the folks in this room, that it may not happen to them, but it may happen to your family. And so I mention it here simply because it's something you can share with your kids and your grandkids. That's a huge issue that will still impact you because it'll impact your family. And that is sexting, right? And hopefully it may infect people here too. I don't know how you'll live your lives, but this is where you get into this romance online and you send pictures of yourself to someone you're not supposed to. And then they come back and extort you for money saying, I'm going to share these pictures with all of your friends. And this happened. I had a call on this to me last week. An older gentleman, he was retired. He was on a site he wasn't probably supposed to be on. But he shared pictures with someone he was dealing with online. And they came back and said, I'm going to tell your wife, I'm going to tell your family members, I'm going to tell all these people that you did this thing unless you give me money. And so my response to him was like, look, no one's getting arrested on this. Keep that in mind. I said, but they're not going to do anything. They're not going to release the information to your friends. They probably don't have all that information. Although they had reached out to his wife to friend her on Facebook. So they use social media as part of that extortion to get friends with her to say, this is what your husband's doing. I mean, I did have to mention, you have to deal with the issue with your wife. I can't help you out there, but just tell them you're not going to pay money and stop communicating with them, for God's sake. Stop texting with them, lose their number, all that kind of stuff. And the problem is he just didn't know the threat was there, right? That's the issue, is people don't realize this can happen, or they think it's not going to happen to me because I don't have anything anyone would want. That's a bad thought. Everybody has something some bad guy wants, be it your money, your information, access to your computer, whatever. They want something. So hopefully for him, he just ignored it and stopped dealing with it, and it kind of will go away. But with a lot of these scammers, if they're extorting you, if it's extortion more than anything else, where they say they're going to do this thing, they're not going to do it. There's a new one coming that's out now. You're going to get it by email, and it's ultimately going to move to social media, because these things always move to social media because that's where the audience is, where you get a picture of your house and they say, we've been watching your house. We have access to the cameras in your house and you're doing things you're not supposed to do. So we want $500 or we want $1,000. So that's coming. Not here yet. I don't think in social media, but it's coming to social media. And you will see it. Just ignore it. They really don't have anything.
Wow, that's frightening. And once again, the emotional hook gets people, and then it transitions to all those other things. So thank you to Darren Mott, former supervisory special agent, now cybercrime fighter.
Investigator,
and
more investigator.
investigator, yes, and totally appreciate your time. So we're gonna start going to questions from our audience. But Strat, if you could, before we do that, while we wait for the questions to build up, can you go to the slide, please, of the donotcall.gov? Now, one of the things that really I've seen an impact on people is that they're getting tons of calls. So from a personal experience, okay, I've found that there's a national do not call registry, and it's sponsored by the government, and you can add your phones to this registry so that your calls will be greatly diminished. Okay, the information's on the screen right there. If you want to go to the donotcall.gov site itself online, you can do that, or you can call at the 88 number that's listed there. So when I did it for myself, my parents, and I helped my siblings do it too. And we noticed a dramatic reduction in calls, like 90%. My mother in particular donated to a lot of causes, and it's legal for businesses to give out your information. When you sign up, you sign a waiver that says that they can use your information. So it's legal for them to pass it on. And what happens is that it gets sold eventually to these bad actors on the internet. So to combat that, definitely go and register your number on this do not call registry. I think that'll be one of the main things that you'll see that'll help you here, because it'll eliminate too many calls that you're getting from both legitimate and illegitimate people there. So anyway, we've got some questions. Strat, I'm going to throw it over to you and Marissa, and we're going to bring some people up to answer some questions. Darren had answered some Akeem's question, so people can read that there. Strat, you can bring up some people, please, from our audience for their questions.
Sure, John. Just before we go to our audience questions, can I just invite Carlos back to share some of these real quick resources that that he has with the FBI. Carlos, would you care to go through these real quick?
Yeah, so most of these are just help desk or resources that you can use if you...
Hello, Carlos, can you hear us? We can't hear you.
My apologies, my mic was muted. So most of these links are just help desk or resources that you can utilize to if you ever feel like you're being a target, if you ever feel like you're being a potential victim, or you know of someone, or you just want to get more information. To get to us directly, it would be the FBI Internet Crimes Complaint Center at www.ic3.gov. All of these are very valuable information spots or numbers, so please check them out.
Thank you, Carlos. And also just want to share, John, these questions will be put in chat so you can download them from chat, all these resources, apologies. All right, I'd like to invite Robin Deister, apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name, but Robin, would you care to come on and ask your question about social media privacy?
Yeah, sure. I just had a question. I'm private on all my social media accounts, but I do notice that there's some people trying to hack in. Does that help if you don't, if you stay private on all your social media? And I guess it was kind of answered earlier.
Yes, I'll throw that one over to Darren.
Multi-factor authentication. Turn on multi-factor authentication and they cannot hack your site.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, can you explain multi-factor authentication real quick, Darren, for
Yes.
our audience?
Yes. So you go into your privacy settings and it'll say like password and security, and you pick, it should say multi-factor, two-factor. They all say different things, but it basically will create the ability for you to get a text message either to your phone or to your email, or to use what's called a authenticator app. Personally, I would recommend the authenticator app because there's now a scam called SIM swapping. It's been around a long time, but they basically replicate your phone. And so if you get that SMS message, they may also get it. Risk is low. It's not a huge risk, but it's a risk. So when you put in your login and password, it'll then ask for the next code. What is that 6-digit code or that 8-digit code to get to the next level? It's something that because the bad guys have something which is your password, perhaps, but they don't have something you have, which is that second multi-factor authentication piece.
All right, excellent answer, Darren, and thank you, Robin, for your question. Strat, let's
All right,
take the
let's
next
go
one, please.
to Maisha Aban. You have a question about older adults on social media. How can they lessen their likelihood of fraud?
Yes,
Are you on? Go
I'm
ahead,
here.
please.
I'm here. Thank you. Yep. That's absolutely my question. So what are some actions that seniors can take on social while they're on social media to lessen their likelihood of fraud? I mean, I'm hearing what some people are saying now about, the multi-authentication, but are things that they should, like, are there 3 do nots for individuals to remember while they are on social media sites, such as the Facebook or the Instagram and so on?
I'm seeing Dave nodding his head, so I'm going to throw this one over to Dave Morrow.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna get on my soapbox here. Well, the first thing, back to making your profile private means basically, at least in the Facebook world, and I think in the other ones too, it restricts who can see your information, and that's the biggest thing. Is most people, as I said, overshare. So restrict your information, make your Facebook or at least pieces of your Facebook profile as private that only you and your friends can see. Secondly, is don't just accept any kind of friend request from anybody, because that's, as I said, over half at one point in time of the profiles were fake on social media. So do a little due diligence, look and see if you really know this person, ask some questions if somebody out of the blue tries to friend you, and don't just automatically click on it. It's especially dangerous on things like LinkedIn and stuff. If you're in business still, you're trying to increase your network. And so I've known people when I was in business that would basically just accept anybody that wanted to be there, have access to their profile on LinkedIn. And they started having huge amounts of fraud. So just be kind of cautious about who you allow to befriend you on these social media sites. Keep your information tight. And then finally, this goes for anything on the internet. Most of us have our little voices in the back of our head that will start, telling us something's not right here. And when I talk to victims on our helpline, most times, more times than not, at some point in the conversation, they will say, "Yeah, I knew there was something wrong with this, but I went ahead and did it anyway. I knew I shouldn't have bought that gift card to pay my traffic fines, but I went ahead and did it anyway." Those kinds of things. Well, if the voice is telling you don't do it, listen to the voice. And if it's too good to be true, as Carla said, if there's a whole bunch of little aphorisms that we need to remember, because that hasn't changed. This is all technology driven, but that kind of human nature thing hasn't changed. So those are the 3 things to me that you could do to protect yourself and won't cost you a dime.
Thank you, David.
Great advice, Dave. Now, I think we have time for one more question.
Sure.
Strat, can you please get this one?
Let's invite Jim Heilman on. He used to work in the medical device industry and has a question about data breaches. Jim, are you on? Okay. I think we may have missed Jim Hyman. Anyway, he mentions that I worked in the medical device industry and patient data had to be secure and no personal identifiable information was allowed to be possible. I guess his question is, why do banks and companies lose this data, and how can they have such access to such data? So that's kind of how I sum up his question. Anybody want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I used to write those letters, so I can talk a little bit about that. I ran data breach response for a couple of major corporations, and most people don't understand that a company that has your information for whatever reason, usually a legitimate business reason, will have a third-party company, a subcontractor, to do something, whether it's to mail your statements to you or whatever, and they'll get access to a lot of that information. And quite often now, the breach that you get notified as by letter or whatever is not to the company itself, it's to one of their partners. It's to one of the third parties that they had to give your information to. So that's one thing that very few companies do everything themselves now. They all farm it out to other companies to do it, and that's one reason, because those companies may not have the resources or the knowledge to secure their systems as well as the big companies do. So that's one thing. Another thing is that it's just really, really hard to keep track of all that data. Lots of companies, when I was doing security consulting, you'd ask them, okay, where is all this data stored? And they could never tell you all the places, because they're just, information gets scattered all over the networks of a company. And so if a hacker is able to break into a company, chances are they'll find it lying around there somehow.
Darren, did you have something to add on that too?
Yeah, I'll add that there's so many data breaches out there, that there's so many legitimate login credentials that have been compromised, and so many passwords that are available, that it's not hard for a bad guy to get legitimate access to a company's network infrastructure with legitimate credentials that they just use by guessing the password, because they have a long list of passwords and ultimately one of them works. And so even the medical company didn't have personal identifiable information. I bet they had some somewhere. And I'm sure there was an IT guy that could probably access this if he wanted to. And if I had that guy's password, I could access it. A lot of these data breaches are occurring, especially at these big companies like Wells Fargo. Pick your data breach of the moment, not because of some hardware vulnerability that they hacked into. They had a legitimate login, a legitimate password, no two-factor authentication, and then they were in as an administrator. They could see everything they wanted to see.
Excellent. Thank you, Darren, for adding to that. Now, I just want to finish with the statement about, I'm honored to be here with law enforcement professionals, real law enforcement professionals. I sometimes say I'm the cybersecurity sheriff here in Orange County, because I've been in this field for 40 years and worked at IBM for 20, and before that, even at McDonnell Douglas, which people in our area would know was a big company here. So I'm kidding when I say I'm the sheriff, but I'm not kidding where I say that all of you on our audience, I'd love you to be my deputies and our deputies, where you could take this information that we've given you here today, and you could help maybe 2 people that you know. If you see some of these red flags come up, that someone is talked about having a new romance with someone they met online, or how great this crypto investment is going because they've made 400% in the last 3 weeks. That'll be your cue to maybe point them in the right direction. And there's great resources at aarp.org/fraud. And you could go there and you could see all kinds of information there. You can go to the Fraud Watch Network. Strata's put the slide up there with also that 877 number. We call it an 800 number. But anyway, please take it and help people in your family and your friends circle. But this has been a great conversation, packed full of information. You'll be getting an email that'll give you the links that we talked about here. I'd like to really thank Dave Morrow coming back again. It's getting to be a thing with us, Dave. I'd also like to thank the FBI intelligence analyst, Carlos Naranjo, for all of your great information. Thank you, Carlos. Also, Darren Mott. Darren was a former FBI supervisory special agent. Now he founded a Gold Shield Cyber Investigations and Consulting. They're all helping people. Today's conversation was focused on the community we are representing, the older adults. We're going to have 3 more cyber chats coming up in the next few weeks. So please, you'll see that information. Look forward to seeing you again. I'm John Young. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day. Take care, everybody. Bye.